Welcome to Family Drama Stories from Reddit. Real family drama told from the heart. Let's begin. Hello, my name is Carol, and for most of my life, I believed that family meant sacrifice. I worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, and gave without asking for anything in return. But that summer, as we drove through Colorado's winding hills in the RV I paid for, my brother turned to me with a smirk and said, "It's just easier when you take care of everything." That's when something inside me snapped. I didn't grow up with much. Our parents were hardworking, but the kind of poor that makes you apologize for wanting birthday cake. So, from a young age, I learned how to give. Give my time, give my food, give my share, even when there wasn't enough to go around, especially to my younger brother, Nate. He was born 3 years after me, loud and demanding from day one. While I helped Mum fold laundry or heat canned soup on the stove, Nate was praised just for being the baby. It never really changed. As we grew, I got the hand-me-downs and rules. He got the excuses and second chances. By the time we were adults, it was just how things were. I worked my way through nursing school while Nate tried and quit 4 different colleges, always with some big idea that fizzled out before it caught fire. Still, my parents coddled him. "He'll figure it out," they'd say. "Carol, be patient." I was patient. Patient while they let Nate live at home rent-free. Patient when they asked me to co-sign a car loan he never paid. Patient when Mum cried on the phone after he drained their savings with another failed venture. Then they passed. Dad first, then Mum 5 years later. And somehow, I ended up being the one cleaning out the house, settling the estate and covering funeral costs. Nate couldn't handle it, said grief made him too fragile. But I was expected to be the strong one, the one with a steady job, the one who always handled things. Fast forward to last spring. I had just retired early after nearly 4 decades in nursing. My hands ached more than they used to. My back flared up from old shifts I couldn't forget. But I had saved. Carefully, quietly. I wasn't rich by any means, but I had enough for one dream: to finally take the cross-country RV trip I'd talked about since I was 25. Redwood forests, the Grand Canyon, Colorado, Wyoming, the open road. It was the one indulgence I allowed myself. So I bought a used RV, nothing fancy, just enough to sleep in and cook a meal. And I started planning. I told Nate about it in passing during one of our rare phone calls. I should have known better. He lit up like a kid promised a pony. "You're going alone?" he asked. "Don't you think it'd be safer with someone else? I mean, come on, it's the adventure of a lifetime." I didn't answer him right away. My gut told me no, but that old familiar guilt crept in like fog. I heard my mother's voice. "Be patient with your brother." And before I knew it, I had agreed. Nate would join me for 2 weeks of the 6-week trip. Just the first leg, through Colorado and New Mexico. I spent weeks preparing, stocking the RV with groceries, mapping campgrounds, printing reservations. I even bought Nate a new pair of hiking boots, since he claimed his old ones had mysteriously vanished in his latest apartment move. I should have seen it coming. The way he showed up a day late for departure with a duffel bag full of unfolded laundry and a smirk that said he was doing me a favour. "I figured you'd have all this figured out," he said, tossing his bag into the RV and collapsing onto the pull-out bed. "You always do." That first night on the road, I did all the driving, cooked dinner, cleaned up. Nate scrolled on his phone, posted a photo of our adventure to social media with the caption, "Hitting the road with the best big sister ever." I laughed it off, told myself I was overreacting. But something about the way he said our adventure made me pause. Because this trip wasn't supposed to be ours. It was supposed to be mine. And I was starting to feel like a passenger in my own escape. By the 3rd day, I was exhausted. Not from the road, but from the weight of Nate. He treated the trip like a luxury cruise, not a carefully planned journey I had dreamed about for decades. He slept in late, left his clothes strewn everywhere, and had the gall to mock the music I played on the old RV radio. "Seriously, Carol? James Taylor again?" he scoffed one morning as I flipped through the preset stations. "This whole playlist sounds like a dentist's office." I bit my tongue. Not because he was right. He wasn't, but because I didn't want to ruin the peace I'd worked so hard for. But it wasn't peace, not really. It was quiet endurance, the kind I had lived with my entire life around Nate. We were driving through Colorado by then, past canyons that took my breath away. I tried to point them out, hoping he'd share in the awe. Instead, he was glued to his phone, scrolling endlessly. "You're missing it," I said gently. He didn't look up. "I've seen mountains before," he replied flatly. That night, at a small RV park nestled near the edge of a national forest, I cooked dinner under the stars. Just something simple, chili and cornbread from a boxed mix. Nate walked over, wrinkled his nose, and said, "Man, don't you have anything better than this?" I stared at him. For a moment, I wasn't in the RV park. I was 10 years old again, splitting a peanut butter sandwich with him while he complained it didn't have jelly. "You know what?" I said, my voice tight. "No, I don't." He blinked. I don't think he expected me to answer. Maybe he forgot I had a voice of my own. Later that night, I took a walk alone. The air was crisp, and the stars were impossibly clear. I stood there for a long time, watching my breath form tiny clouds in the cold. And I realized something. This trip had already become a metaphor for my life. Me navigating every twist in the road. Nate along for the ride. Me fueling the tank. Him complaining about the view. I came back to the RV ready to say something, to set a boundary. But when I opened the door, I found him FaceTiming with one of his buddies, giving a virtual tour of the RV. "Yeah, man, it's all mine for a few weeks," he bragged, panning the camera across the interior. "We're living it up out here." I stopped in my tracks. He noticed me and turned the phone. "Speak of the devil. This is Carol, my sister. She's tagging along. Cool, huh?" Tagging along. I didn't say anything. I just walked to the back, climbed into my bunk, and stared at the ceiling. That sentence echoed in my skull like thunder. The next morning, I got up early, earlier than usual, and started the engine without waking him. I needed space, even if it was just a few miles of it. The sun was rising, casting gold across the empty 2-lane highway, and for the first time since the trip began, I felt like I was breathing again. When he finally stumbled into the passenger seat, groggy and grumpy, he asked, "Where are we even going?" "Someplace quiet," I replied. He laughed like I was joking. But I wasn't. We arrived at a remote hiking spot by midday. There was a winding trail that led to a lookout point over the canyons. I told him I wanted to hike it alone. "You sure you'll be okay?" he asked, for once sounding vaguely concerned. "I've been okay for a long time," I said. "This isn't new." He didn't follow me. Maybe he finally understood. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to push back. Either way, I was alone. And it was beautiful. The wind was strong up there, whipping my hair around as I looked out over the vast, rugged land. I stood there a long while, tears slipping down my cheeks. Not out of sadness, but clarity. I wasn't just on a trip, I was on a pilgrimage. Not towards something new, but away from something old. And the further I walked, the lighter I felt. I came back to the RV with dirt on my shoes and peace in my chest. The kind of peace that only comes from miles of silence and the realization that you're no longer tethered to someone else's version of who you should be. Nate was waiting with a half-eaten sandwich and a bored expression. "Good hike?" he asked, as if it mattered. "It was," I said, placing my jacket on the hook by the door. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. That night, I finally told him the truth. Why I'd planned this trip, what it meant to me, and how I needed time, real time, to reclaim a life that had been swallowed by everyone else's needs. "I'm tired, Nate," I said. Not just physically. I'm tired of always carrying the weight while you float through life like it owes you something. He scoffed. Where's this coming from? From years of silence, I said. I let you walk all over me because I thought that was love. But it's not. It's enabling. He didn't respond right away, just stared at the floor like a scolded child. But then came the sting. Is this about Mum and Dad? Because you're not some martyr, Carol. You wanted to help. No, I replied, voice steady. I didn't want to. I had to because no one else ever stepped up. The air between us thickened. For once, he had no comeback. 2 days later, we reached Albuquerque, his final stop. He had a friend there who owed him a couch for a few nights. As I pulled up to the curb, he packed slowly, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. He stood at the edge of the RV, 1 foot on the step, and looked back at me. You're different now, he said. I am, I replied, or maybe I just stopped pretending. He gave a half-hearted smile and nodded. Well, thanks for the ride, I guess. I didn't say anything. I just closed the door behind him. As I pulled back onto the highway, the RV felt lighter. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. No more crumbs in the seats, no more rolled eyes or snide comments. Just me, the road, and the quiet hum of my second chance. That night, I parked in a small campground under an open sky. I made myself a real dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and a bit of wine, and I sat outside in a folding chair, staring up at the stars. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for being alone. I felt strong, whole. Like I was finally showing up in my own life. A few days later, Nate texted. Just one line, let me know when you're home. I might need a loan. I didn't reply. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Because this trip wasn't just a journey through mountains and canyons. It was a reckoning, a breaking of cycles, a declaration that I was no longer available to be used, dismissed, or forgotten. I drove through Arizona, stopping at every overlook that caught my eye. I lingered in small towns and chatted with strangers. I spent 2 whole days in silence, just reading, writing, and walking. The world was quieter without Nate in my ear. But my thoughts, they were loud, louder than they'd ever been. They reminded me of all the times I had given too much, paid bills that weren't mine, took calls I didn't have the energy for, showed up when no one else bothered, and always got guilt in return instead of gratitude. I used to think it was my role, my responsibility, the dependable older sister. But on that road, alone and unburdened, I began to realize something painful and true. I had been raised to believe that love was measured in sacrifice, and I was finally ready to stop bleeding for people who never brought a bandage. It was early morning when I reached Sedona. The light was soft and golden, casting long shadows over red rock formations that looked almost otherworldly. I parked the RV by a trailhead and climbed up a short path with a thermos of coffee in one hand and a folded letter in the other, one I'd written but never mailed. It was addressed to my parents. I'd started it on the second night of the trip after Nate's comment about me wanting to help. At first, I wrote with anger, but as the miles passed, my words softened, not because I forgave them, but because I had finally released the need to explain myself. I didn't owe anyone a justification for choosing peace. I sat at the top of a ridge and read the letter aloud, not to them, but to the wind. The ending was simple. This isn't goodbye. It's the beginning of me living without needing your permission. I folded the letter back up and slid it into my pocket, unsure if I'd ever send it. Maybe some words were meant to be said only once. Back at the RV, I found 2 voicemails from Nate. The first was short. Hey, look, things are tight. I could use a bit of help just till I figure stuff out. The second came a day later, more clipped. I guess you're ignoring me now. That's cool. Just don't expect me to pretend everything's fine when you come crawling back. Crawling back. He really didn't get it. I deleted both messages without listening to the end. I wasn't mad. Not anymore. I was just tired of always being the one they called when life got hard, of being the backup plan dressed up as a blessing. A week later, I stopped at a tiny desert town in New Mexico. The kind of place with a single diner, faded murals on brick walls, and a post office that looked more like a shed. It was there, over black coffee and dry scrambled eggs, that I ran into someone I hadn't seen in over 30 years. Her name was June. She had been my roommate during a summer community college course in Santa Fe. We had bonded over late-night walks, a shared love of mystery novels, and the quiet understanding that neither of us really fit in back home. I barely recognized her, but she knew me right away. "Carol?" she asked, setting her mug down, eyes wide with recognition. I turned slowly and smiled. "June?" We talked for hours, about what we'd done with our lives, about how many times we'd each gotten close to something we wanted, only to put it off for someone else's needs. At one point, she leaned in and said, "You always gave everyone everything, even when you had nothing left." I blinked at her words. I'd never realized how visible my exhaustion had been, even back then. "Not anymore," I said. She smiled. "Good. About time." We exchanged numbers, and she invited me to stay a few days. I almost said no, out of habit, thinking of the miles I still had left to go. But then I realized there was no deadline anymore, no one waiting on me, no one keeping score. So I stayed. We sat under the stars each evening with glasses of wine and stories that made us laugh until our sides hurt. And every morning I woke up feeling less like the woman who had left home weeks ago and more like the girl I used to be, the one who dreamed of quiet joy, not performance. On my last night there, June asked if I'd go back. "To your old life," she clarified, "the version of it where you keep fixing everything." I shook my head. There's nothing to go back to. It was never mine. And I meant it. By the time I left her place, something inside me had settled. I wasn't just on a trip anymore. I was reclaiming lost time. Days, months, years I had given away to people who never bothered to ask how I was holding up. The final leg of the journey was calm, almost meditative. I drove slowly, windows down, music low, heart quiet. I didn't check messages, didn't take calls. My phone, like my past, stayed tucked away, because the road ahead didn't need permission. It only needed me. I arrived home just after dusk. The sky behind my house was bruised with streaks of purple and fading gold, like the trip itself. Beautiful, complicated, and finally coming to an end. I parked the RV in the driveway and sat for a moment with my hands resting on the wheel. The porch light was off, the mailbox still overflowing. No one had checked in while I was gone, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Inside, the house felt unfamiliar at first. Quiet in a different way now. Not the suffocating kind of silence that used to echo with the expectations of others, but a peaceful, private stillness that welcomed me home like a warm robe after a long bath. There were still dishes in the sink from the night before I left, a few bills stacked on the table, but none of it weighed on me the way it used to. I unpacked slowly, giving myself permission to leave the rest for tomorrow. Then I made tea. As I curled up in my favourite chair, phone finally in hand, I saw them. The messages. 27 of them. All from Nate, Mum, or Sarah. Missed calls, texts, even a few guilt-laden voicemails. One from Nate read, "So what? You just disappear now? Nice, real grown-up, Carol." Another from Sarah. "You left Mom alone in all of this. She's sick. Don't act like that doesn't matter." And one from my mother herself. "Please call me. I don't understand why you're doing this to us." I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I archived every message and turned the phone off again. Because what they never understood, what they probably still don't, is that it It wasn't about a single vacation or a handful of missed calls. It was about decades of being the one who stayed, who paid, who put herself second so everyone else could stay afloat. And I was done drowning for people who wouldn't toss me a rope. 2 days after I got back, a letter arrived. It was from my mother, handwritten, 6 pages front and back. She wrote about her health, about Nate's struggles, about how Sarah was overwhelmed with the kids, but nowhere in that letter, not once did she ask how I was. Not once did she say, "Are you okay?" Or, "I'm sorry for the years we leaned on you without asking if you could bear it." That's when I knew I'd made the right decision. The weight I used to carry didn't just come from their requests, it came from the silence that followed after I said yes. No thanks, no appreciation, just more expectation. I burned the letter, not out of anger, out of clarity. It was time to make space for things that fed me instead of drained me. The next week, I signed up for a pottery class. I went alone. Didn't tell anyone. Sat next to a retired school teacher named Millie, who smelled like cinnamon and told jokes under her breath while we worked the clay. We exchanged numbers afterward. The following weekend, I took a drive out to the coast, just me and a notebook, and wrote for hours beside the water. I'd forgotten how good it felt to make something just because I wanted to. I saw my old life more clearly now, how much I had bent to make space for others, how I shrank so they could feel taller. And I finally asked myself the one question that changed everything. What would it feel like to grow into the person I was always meant to be, without asking permission first? The answer came quietly, like the tide. It would feel like this. I haven't spoken to my brother or sister since I got back. My mum sends occasional texts now, short ones. She's testing the waters probably. But I'm not diving back in. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And that's okay. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is choose yourself. Especially after a lifetime of being told that love means sacrificing who you are. Now, when I wake up, I stretch slowly. I open the blinds and watch the light spill in. I drink my coffee while it's still hot. I walk without rushing. I laugh without guilt. And I live. Not for them, for me. As we move through life, many of us take on the role of the dependable one, the person everyone leans on in a crisis. We give, we support, we stay silent. But sometimes the hardest and most necessary thing we can do is step away, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. This story reminds us that peace often comes not from fixing broken relationships, but from letting go of those that refuse to see your worth. Family isn't just about blood. It's about mutual respect, empathy, and appreciation. And when those are missing, it's okay to say, no more. So for anyone who's ever felt invisible in their own family, know this. Your worth isn't tied to what you give. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away to protect your peace? Please like this video if it touched your heart. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful family stories just like this one. Your support means the world.